Hey guys, what's up? It's just Connor here. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about how I learned high ticket sales, how I learned high ticket closing, or as I like to call it, put simply, how I learned the skill of sales, how to sell. Okay, so the reason I want to create this video, long story short, is that I think there's a lot of epiphanies that I had along my journey of learning sales, and hopefully you guys can get some good insights around the different stories and the different conclusions and epiphanies that I had throughout my entire process of learning this skill. So hopefully you can fast track it, but you can also see that I didn't start very good at sales. In fact, I learned a lot about sales when I was first beginning because I sucked and I was very bad, right? I guess a very, very clear thing I want to communicate again is that sales is a skill that you can learn. You don't have to be natural at it. You don't have to be gifted at it, right? It's a skill that you can learn. And I was completely terrible. Before sales, I could barely even pick up the phone to order pizza, right? That's how bad I was with, I guess, just talking to people in general. So if you're introverted, if you're extroverted, right, sales can still be for you. And I want to show you that, right? So with that said, let's go ahead and jump in. So when I first started learning sales, as you probably would have seen in my previous videos, I spent $7,500 on Mentor and I learned very fundamental basics, right? Basically sales methods that were used back in the 80s and 90s that don't really work now today with today's current buyer, right? A lot of people are much more skeptical. A lot of people are much more conservative in the way that they make purchasing decisions. Does that mean that you can't sell them? No, but that means you have to go about it a much more different way and get people to persuade themselves to take action rather than you actually, hype selling and doing these hard closing tactics that just don't really normally work anymore, okay? So from there, the first thing that I ever learned in that training, the first training that I ever did, the only thing that I learned there from a sales perspective was that the most certain person in a sales process will win, okay? So that was pretty much the first thing that I learned, right? And then other than that, everything inside the training was pretty much useless. I've never used it in my sales career. In fact, I have to learn it a lot in other places, which I'm going to tell you about here in a second. So when I first got my first role, my biggest problem was that I had questions laid out in a sales process and it was very difficult to understand. Sometimes sales conversations would go from an hour to 2 hours because I didn't have a directional guidance as to where the conversation was going. We would talk about one thing, then we'd talk about another, and the energy was dispersed too much around information, and we're talking about things that were interesting but not productive to the sales conversation. Okay? So what I had, I talked to my mentor, Ben, at the time, and he said, okay, let me tell you a bit of an analogy, Connor, and hopefully this will help you. This was my second epiphany with sales. The first was certainty. Second was principle-based selling or objective-based selling, right? So basically my mentor, Ben, he said, Connor, I want you to imagine you're going on a hike, right, with a couple of friends. And you have the end goal objective in mind. You've got a mountain that you're trying to climb. You've got a destination that you're trying to achieve, right? But along that journey, you've got consecutive destinations that are, again, people want to look at, right? They want to visit. So every time a person, goes to these destinations, if you're just like wanting just people to just keep going towards the end and you don't have a specific mapped out structure, you seem like a bit of an asshole, right? And you don't come off, the best way that you can. So with that in mind, you just have to understand, okay, there are different destinations along the process, and as long as you understand the principles of what you're trying to achieve in each phase in your sales process, you're able to walk away from that given said topic, and then you're able to return back efficiently. And this is what leads to productive sales conversations, not interesting conversations. So what I did is I mapped out my entire sales process into different phases, and in those phases, I found certain objectives that I'm trying to achieve. And what this does is basically puts me in the position to where I can have productive sales conversation and not just interesting sales conversation. And my sales calls went from 1 to 2 hours to about 30 to 45 minutes. So that shortened my length down a duration of calls, which induced a lot less think about objections, a lot less time objections, a lot less every objection, really, because there was less time that we're spending on the call and we're just talking about the important stuff and not clouding a prospect's mind with too much information for them to delay or put off a decision. Okay. Now, the next stage to that was when I was working with my mentor, Jeremy. So I paid $20,000 Australian upfront to work with him personally, one-on-one. And what I did is, now that I knew there were principles inside of a sales process, what I try to do is pick apart each single question to achieve those different principles. And so the next stage of, I guess, sales understanding that I found is not only knowing where you're going in the process and what you're trying to achieve as far as like objectives and boxes you're trying to fill with what I call as objective-based selling. The next stage to that is knowing why you're saying the things you're saying. Why are you asking the questions that you're asking? In what tonality are you asking them? In what cadence? In what timing? Right? These are all very, very important factors that, again, started to let me peel back the layer to where, as one of my mentors, Matt, would say, is that it feels quite like that you're in the matrix, right? When you start to get really good at sales and you start to build up all these skills and you're able to very easily see what's happening throughout a sales conversation, it almost feels like you are in the matrix, right? You're seeing objections before they're happening, right? You can pre-handle them. You know what a prospect's going to say before they say it. You're 10 chess moves ahead. This is when sales starts to get really, really fun and becomes really, really easy, right? And this was a big breakthrough for me, which again, certainty, then objective-based selling, but then knowing the questions that I'm asking and why I'm asking them, right? That's really, really key. And then above that was tonality, right? And I worked with my mentor, Jeremy, on this specifically one-on-one. I would go through and ask each individual question why he would say it in a certain way and find out the different upticks, right? In, I guess, tonality, right? Upwards inflections, downwards inflections, neutral, right? And I would try to understand to a very advanced degree every single question and every little tiny little variable, any inflection, any downwards inflection, right? Even within a sentence, every single thing I would try to mimic and become very similar to, like, you know, my mentor, considering that he had made millions of dollars consecutively year and year and year in commissions, right? Just doing commission-only sales. So I knew that to be the best, I need to learn from the best. And so I tried to mimic and become very similar to the best, which over time I got very good at, right? And then the last thing is reframes and objection handling, okay? So we've got certainty, we've got learning about your entire sales process and selling through principles and objective-based selling. Then we understand what you're asking and why you're asking it, right? The timing, the cadence, right? And then you've got tonality on top of that, which gets you different answers based off what you're saying. So not only the words you're saying and the tonality that you're saying, you're going to get different answers and different responses. So sales conversations are going to go down different avenues. And then obviously, like we talked about, which is reframes and objection handling. These are the advanced things, right? Reframes can help with very advanced high-level objection handling, pre-objection handling, or pre-handling objections. And that was the next advanced level step for me, which was becoming very good at objection handling and reframes. So objection handling for me was understanding that it's two-pronged. There is a structure, right? So the better people do objections is, number one, that they remain calm. Number two is they have a structure. And number three is that they don't run out of things to say. These three things all together combined basically make a very person or a salesperson very good at objection handling, and has made myself a lot of money, right? Just by knowing those three things. So as long as you're self-aware of those, and of course you're using like reframes and identity reframes on top as very advanced things, these are the different sequential order that, again, I learned high ticket sales in to become better, right? So that's pretty much it all laid out, guys. That's pretty much how I learned sales from start to finish. And if you're looking to shortcut that path, you don't want to spend $50,000 like I did to learn all these things and take probably thousands of sales calls and have thousands of sales conversations, then I would consider booking a call for the Remote Sales Academy. All right, in there, we teach you everything that I've learned over the past couple of years on how to do this, shortcut your path from your 9-to-5 transitioning to remote sales full time. And yeah, that's pretty much what we do, right? So with that said, guys, hopefully you found some insights there. Hopefully you found that valuable. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.